These are the books which I have read that I can recommend to you. I've learned so much from these authors over the years, so I put together this short list of books I think that will be very informative to you as well. The Creature from Jekyll Island, if you haven't read it, this is definitely on the top of my list for what I believe would be important to read if you haven't already. John Perkins wrote The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I read the original version. They have the newer version. Definitely read this. It talks about toppling governments and more issues like that. America's Great Depression is a fantastic book by Murray N. Rothbard, who... This book, I will admit, is quite boring because of all the details it gets into, but you want to know what happened during the Great Depression, you read this book and you got it. Liberty Defined by Ron Paul is amazing because it just briefly gets into so many different topics. It doesn't go into detail at all. He's not claiming to be a specialist on any of them, but I read through it and I agreed with basically everything he said. So I really like that book a lot. The Crash of 1929 by Galbraith was a book that nobody really talks about, but I thought it to be amazing and I learned so much more in the, about the Great Depression, and I think that it really was a lot easier to read this than America's Great Depression, but both of them, of course, are very, very good. Infectious Greed is another one that really I've never heard anyone discuss, but I always talk about it on my YouTube channel, and Frank Partnoy has an amazing way to break everything down that happened from the 80s, how derivatives began, talking about Enron and everything else. So I thought it was a fantastic book as well. If you want to know how the financial system really works and everything that goes on behind the scenes, Infectious Greed is the way to go. Another big book, but still very good. The Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver by Mike Maloney. I'm sure a lot of you already know about Mike Maloney. It's not really about gold and silver that much. It's sort of like my book where I talk about gold and silver, but it talks about the monetary system as a whole. So definitely something that I think is important. Tomorrow's Gold by Mark Faber is a fantastic book that I think should help everybody understand global markets. The Dollar Crisis. I think of the Dollar Crisis like part 2 or almost like a 2.0 version of Mike Maloney's book. So if you like Mike Maloney's book, The Dollar Crisis gets into more of that. I think I really enjoyed that book, definitely. The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America is the best book in the world on the education system. Written by Charlotte Thompson Iserby. She gets into everything chronologically. By the time you're 30% through the book, you figure, like, why am I even reading this? This is ridiculous. It gets into literally every document you could ever imagine about how this education system is completely corrupt. Highly recommend it. By the way, get the abridged version. If you click on this link here, it's going to bring you to the abridged version because the other one is just gigantic and it's just impossible to carry around. This one is more reasonable. And then we get into the other topics here where, for example, Russell Blaylock is a board-certified neurosurgeon. If you want to understand health, this is a good place to start. It gets into more details in some other writings, but in this book here, I thought it was fantastic. Health and Nutrition Secrets. Big book, so detailed, gets into the excitotoxins, which he has another book about, which I think is great as well. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's a classic. I don't even need to mention it. The 4-Hour Workweek, although I don't like Tim Ferriss specifically because of how he's not really passionate about the things that he works on. He's more of what they call a serial entrepreneur, just moving on to the next thing. I thought the book was fantastic, and the last part of that book, just getting into, if you want to know about this or that, go to here, go to there. He tells you like very, very specific websites or services to use. And just that reference at the end is very good. Seeds of Deception by Jeffrey Smith. I would say the top person about genetically modified food. He wrote it all in this book, as well as Genetic Roulette, his other book. Both of them are great. I put this one here. I think it's a little bit more famous. That was another one there. And The China Study is another book, the longest running study on health that's ever been done. And that book there, if you may have seen a documentary, Forks Over Knives, part of the same sort of thing, but the China Study book is definitely one to read if you want to know about health, and that's another one. That's all for these books. I will probably add more in the future. I just wanted to do a little video about this to introduce all of these and why I think they're great. So that's all. Hope you enjoy these books, and if you do, send me an email after you've read one of these because I really want to know what you think. Take care.